Hello guys, this is your friend Itachi Fanfic 3.0 and we are back a new fanfic story which is What if Naruto, Gaara, and Fu became legends by turning their pain into hope for every cursed child? Part 1. Let's start fanfic without wasting more time. The world of shinobi had always been built upon contradictions. Villages preached peace while sharpening weapons in the shadows. Leaders spoke of unity while hiding their darkest experiments behind sealed doors. And somewhere at the center of every promise of harmony, a child suffered the consequences of fear. These children were called Jinchuriki, living prisons entrusted with the most ancient and terrifying beasts known to history. Their hearts carried the weight of entire nations, yet no one ever cared to see whether those hearts could still beat without trembling. People bowed to the power inside them, but recoiled at the sight of the innocent souls who bore it. Among these cursed children lived Naruto Uzumaki, loud, reckless, and unbearably hopeful. He carried within him the nine-tailed fox, a beast spoken of like myth and nightmare. But Naruto refused to let the world write his story through fear. He smiled even when no one smiled back. He shouted his dream even when the wind was the only listener. He believed loneliness could be defeated, as long as he never gave up on connection. Yet even he, with all his stubborn courage, felt an ache he could not name. It was a strange tug in his chest, like a thread pulling him toward something unseen. Nights became restless. Memories that were not his own flickered like forgotten flames. He awakened to the sensation of powerful hearts beating elsewhere, hearts like his. He sensed them suffering, laughing, drowning, hoping. Jinchuriki scattered across the world, all tied to the same unspoken fate. One evening, as the moon climbed high over Konoha, Naruto felt a presence awaken inside him. Kurama's energy trembled with tension he rarely expressed. The fox spirit spoke not with commands, not with mockery, but with an unusual solemnity, a tone that hinted at sincerity rather than hatred. It was the voice of someone who had also been trapped too long. A single truth began to rise like dawn within Naruto's stubborn heart. He was not alone, and never had been. That realization arrived with a wave of purpose stronger than any mission scroll. He understood without reason or logic that others like him were waiting for someone to reach out first. Villages had separated them, but destiny had already begun stitching their paths together. Naruto left the village silently, not as a deserter but as a seeker of something bigger than himself. He did not ask permission, because he wasn't chasing a goal given by anyone else. He was chasing a feeling. One that promised a new life not only for him, but for every child feared for the beast inside them. This journey began at the borders of unknown lands, where desert winds kissed forests and the world itself seemed unsure which direction to grow. There, Naruto's path converged with new destinies. The first to feel his presence was a girl carried by laughter. Fu, host of the Seven Tails, moved through the world as though joy alone could protect her from sorrow. She filled the air with her voice and grinned as if she had defeated every fear. Yet inside her chest lived the silent hope that someone would one day see her kindness before her curse. She felt the same pull Naruto did, a signal made not of chakra, but of longing. Her heart skipped with excitement. It wasn't a summons made of force. It was something more delicate. An invitation to finally belong. At the same time, a boy sculpted from sand and solitude felt the disturbance. Gaara's existence had been forged in nightmares. His village respected only his violence. Peace was a foreign concept that frightened him more than war. But like shifting dunes reshaping the desert, something within him began to move. It was not the Shukaku demanding blood, it was the faint whisper of connection. The feeling, gentle yet insistent, terrified Gaara. For the first time, someone out in the world reached toward him not out of terror, but recognition. He could not ignore it. Even a life built from fear still craved warmth. Naruto found them. not with tracking skills nor orders but with a simple promise carried invisibly. You don't have to be alone anymore. When their paths intersected, confusion struck first, because that is what the world had trained them for. Fu's trust had always turned into betrayal. Gaara's existence had always led to violence. Instinct forced walls between them. But their pain recognized each other immediately. Naruto didn't have to convince them with speeches. His presence spoke louder than any word he could shout. It wasn't power that united them, it was shared survival. For the first time in their lives, they realized someone else understood the invisible battles they had been fighting since birth. That moment became the first thread tied into a new tapestry, one that would soon become unbreakable. But destiny, no matter how hopeful, always invites danger. Far away, hidden in shadows and ambition, the Akatsuki had been waiting for the Jinchuriki to gather. Their leader believed that beasts were wasted inside fragile human hearts. He desired a world controlled through absolute power, the power of tailed beasts stripped of emotion and mercy. The moment Naruto found others like him, eyes filled with hunger fixed on all three of them. The organization moved without hesitation. Plans long whispered in secrecy began to unfold. Capturing one Jinchuriki was already an act of war, but gathering multiple together created an opportunity too valuable to ignore. While Naruto felt joy at finding companions, his newfound connection placed him on the edge of a war he could not yet see. He believed he was beginning a rescue. In truth, he had started a revolution. Naruto, Gaara and Fu stood together not because they trusted one another, but because loneliness had finally stepped aside and allowed curiosity to speak. None of them truly knew what friendship felt like, but something inside their hearts recognized that this moment mattered. They did not need to explain the weight they carried. Each could see it in the other's eyes: the endless nights, the pain of being watched like a wild creature, the scars carved not on the skin but on the soul. The presence of others like them was strange, frightening, and yet strangely comforting. Naruto felt a warmth inside his chest he had never known. Gaara felt the sand within him calm for the first time in years. Fu felt her forced happiness transform into something real. They did not exchange promises. They did not declare loyalty. But they stayed. And staying was more commitment than words could ever show. The world had never given them a place where they belonged. So they chose to create one together. Naruto believed that if he could just keep them together, they could rewrite the destiny that had been forced upon them since birth. He didn't have a plan. He didn't need one. His heart simply whispered that this was the right path, a path of freedom. Meanwhile, the leaders of their villages would soon realize what had happened, and fear would come running. A Jinchuriki leaving a village was considered a threat greater than any army. 3 of them traveling together was a nightmare no nation wanted to face. Rumors would spread. Shinobi would chase them. But those dangers belonged to the future. For now, Naruto felt like the world had finally become a little brighter. As they journeyed onward, they began learning about each other. Not through interrogation or forced conversation, but through small, sincere observations. Naruto noticed that Gaara always walked with caution, as if expecting betrayal at any moment. Gaara noticed that Fu's laughter hid tremors of sadness. Fu noticed that Naruto's bravado was fueled by an ache to be accepted. They understood each other without explanation. Their bond was forming through silence, the kind of silence only those who have been silenced can understand. Across the lands, other Jinchuriki also began to feel the same invisible pull. Their hearts, long accustomed to solitude, trembled with curiosity. Yugito, the Two Tails host, noticed the sudden restlessness in her beast, as if it sensed old friends awakening. Roshi, hardened by years of abandonment, wondered why the world felt different beneath his steps. Han, disciplined and serious, sensed his purpose shifting. Utakata, detached from emotion, found his calm shaken. Even Yagura, who once ruled an entire village, felt the chains on his life loosen ever so slightly. None of them knew why. But they all felt drawn in the same direction. And while hope was gathering quietly, fear traveled much faster. The Akatsuki were already in motion. Their organization did not simply hunt Jinchuriki to harvest power. They wanted to rewrite the balance of the world. Nations stayed peaceful only through fear of destruction from tailed beasts. If those beasts were taken from their hosts, villages would crumble into weakness. The organization believed only they deserved to decide how the world would live, or die. The leader of the Akatsuki watched the shifting tides with dark amusement. He saw the gathering Jinchuriki not as a threat, but as a convenience. Instead of finding them one by one, he could crush them together. He sent his most dangerous followers to intercept, not with urgency, but with confidence. He believed that fear would always be stronger than hope. He did not understand that hope, once awakened, could grow into something unstoppable. Naruto and his newly found companions stopped near an ancient path carved by forgotten travelers. The air around them felt heavy, not with danger, but with history. They did not camp for rest. They stopped because their hearts wanted time to recognize that they were no longer alone. Gaara had never let anyone sit close to him, yet he allowed Naruto and Fu to remain near. Fu, who had always filled silence with words, felt safe enough to simply exist quietly. Naruto, who had always forced smiles, discovered that he didn't need to pretend anymore. They looked at the stars above them, not wishing for escape, but imagining a life worth living. None of them understood that this fragile moment of peace was the first breath of a revolution. A revolution not born from power or rage, but from the courage to share pain. The world had given them every reason to stay apart. But they had found one reason to stay together: understanding. Without knowing it, they had already taken the most dangerous step. They had chosen each other. And once chosen, a Jinchuriki's heart never lets go. The world often believed that strength came from isolation, that a weapon was sharpest when wielded without weakness. Villages tried to shape the Jinchuriki into perfect tools by denying them affection, trust, and connection. They locked them inside invisible cages of silence. They taught them to fear the very thing that could have saved them: each other. But fate had different intentions. When Naruto, Gaara, and Fu continued their journey together, the tailed beasts within them also stirred with unexpected reactions. For years, these ancient beings had been trapped behind walls of hatred and distrust. Yet now they felt the presence of others from their kind, not through chakra, but through memory. Memories older than human life. Memories of a time before fear ruled the world. Kurama, the mighty Nine Tails, observed silently as Naruto walked ahead. He had once sworn to despise humans forever, but watching Naruto extend his heart so easily made something within him resentfully soften. He knew what Naruto was trying to build: a unity that defied every rule set by humans and beasts alike. Shukaku, inside Gaara, reacted differently. He snarled and thrummed with irritation. He hated the idea of closeness, of bonds, of hearts trying to reach his host. Yet even the sand spirit could not deny the faint comfort it felt knowing others like him were drawing near. It was a feeling Shukaku had forgotten long ago, the comfort of belonging to a family that once existed before humans separated them. Chome, the seven tails within Fu, fluttered with excitement. Unlike the others, this beast had never given up on the dream of reunion. It whispered encouragement into Fu's spirit, strengthening the hope she had always kept alive: that someday, someone would stay by her side not because they needed her power, but because they wanted her presence. As the three Jinchuriki shared steps across unfamiliar lands, their bond deepened not through spoken promises but through shared silence, a gentle, healing silence. They watched the world not as weapons, but as children finally allowed to breathe. Naruto still believed more Jinchuriki were waiting out there, longing for the same belonging. He felt that calling grew stronger each passing day, as if fate had chosen him to become the thread that tied every broken heart together. They stopped near a lake whose surface shimmered under daylight, a place untouched by fear. It was there that Gaara noticed something surprising within himself, a sense of calm. He did not expect safety, yet he felt it. For once, he sat without tension, without the burden of expecting betrayal. It was the first time in his life that peace felt possible. Fu dipped her fingers into the cool water, watching ripples distort her reflection. She realized this reflection no longer felt like a stranger. The laughter she allowed herself now came from a place that didn't hurt. Alongside these new friends, her smiles no longer needed protection. Naruto lay in the grass, staring at clouds that drifted lazily overhead. His dream had always been to become Hokage so that everyone would acknowledge him. But being here, being understood by those who shared his pain, made him question something deeper. Did he want acknowledgement? Or did he simply want to be seen? The three did not speak about their pasts. They did not talk about tears shed alone. They did not explain scars that never fully healed. But they understood it all. Understanding was enough. Their future, however, was not theirs alone. While their bond grew quietly, the world beyond them stirred with unrest. News began spreading to villages. 3 Jinchuriki were missing. Konoha, Suna, and Takigakure, 3 great and hidden villages, felt a chill of dread. They would not willingly allow their greatest assets to join forces. They feared what unity could create. Fear always grew faster than hope. Shinobi scouts began moving in the shadows. Whispered commands echoed in secret chambers. Leaders debated whether to recover their Jinchuriki, or destroy them before another village claimed their power. Danger from allies rose just as quickly as danger from enemies. Miles away, the Akatsuki watchers tracked every step Naruto and the others took. Their organization saw opportunity, not risk. If these 3 were allowed to gather more, it would save them the effort of hunting each one separately. Eyes filled with cold calculation followed the faint trail of hope that the young Jinchuriki were creating. They believed they could strike at any moment. But what they hadn't prepared for was the strength that healing hearts could produce. When children who had only known sorrow finally tasted belonging, that belonging could ignite a power beyond any beast's rage. Naruto did not yet understand that his bravery in choosing companionship had transformed him into a symbol, a light bright enough for other lost souls to find. The energy of destiny swirled around them like a silent storm, growing darker and brighter all at once. Soon, more footsteps would join their path. Soon, every Jinchuriki would face a choice. Soon, the world would learn what happens when the most overlooked hearts begin to beat together. And when they beat together, no cage could contain them. Far beyond the peaceful lake where Naruto, Gaara, and Fu allowed themselves a moment of quiet courage, the energy of their unity traveled like a silent ripple through the world. It was not chakra that spread outward, but the awakening of hope. A kind of hope that the Jinchuriki had forgotten they deserved. In a quiet village lit by moonlight, Yugito Ni walked alone along a narrow rooftop. Her steps were steady, controlled, precise, the steps of a shinobi who had long accepted duty over desire. She carried the 2 tails within her, a blazing feline spirit whose roar was feared across nations. Strength had become her armor. Pride had become her wall. Yet even the strongest armor could not shield her from a strange, powerful sensation that touched her heart that night. It felt like someone was calling to her. Not with fear, not with dominance, but with understanding. It was something she had never received from anyone except the beast sealed inside her. For the first time, she wondered if there were others walking the same lonely path, and whether following that unknown pull would finally answer the silence inside her. On a distant fiery plateau, Roshi trained alone, forcing his aging body to master the lava chakra gifted, or cursed, to him by the Four Tails. The world treated him as too dangerous to trust, too old to value. He fought not to prove strength but to prove existence. Yet in that moment, his molten chakra quivered with an unfamiliar spark. The beast within him stirred with curiosity, a reminder that bonds between their kind might not be buried forever. Han, whose armored form hid both body and emotion, paused during his endless march across frozen land. Steam rose from his breath like smoke from a train, but for once, he stopped moving. He felt the presence of others, improbable, impossible, yet undeniable. He was a soldier without a home. A guardian without anyone to guard. Now, something invited him to choose a different destiny. Even the quiet lake where Utakata wandered with soap bubbles reflecting sunlight could not hide his surprise when a memory of the other beasts brushed across his calm soul. His life had been shaped by escape, from cruelty, from conflict, from attachment. But this feeling did not chase him. It waited patiently for him to decide whether he still believed he deserved anything more than survival. And in the mist-shrouded land of Kurigakure, Yagura, once a feared Mizukage, sat in reflection. His heart was fractured by manipulation and regret. He had been a ruler without freedom, a boy turned into a puppet by forces that saw him only as a vessel. When the calling reached him, he felt a tremor deep inside the darkness he still carried. He realized that perhaps redemption required stepping outside the walls of the village he once controlled with blood. Each Jinchuriki heard the same question rising inside them, a question whispered by their own hearts. What if I am no longer alone? None of them had the answer yet. But they all began to walk. Meanwhile, the Akatsuki watched closely. Their plans did not weaken with the growing unity, they sharpened. They saw how hope tied the Jinchuriki together like a single thread. To them, that thread was a guide straight to their prey. Their leader considered this a gift of fate. Capturing many at once would hasten the rise of his new world. He believed that unity made fools braver, and easier to break. He did not understand that the strength of the Jinchuriki did not lie in the beasts inside them, but in the hearts they had kept alive despite endless suffering. As Naruto and his companions traveled farther from the borders of the known world, the air around them seemed to shift. Naruto felt his purpose solidify, not as a dream of becoming Hokage, but as a promise to protect the children fate had nearly destroyed. He didn't yet know how to lead, but he understood something even more important. Leaders are born when they choose to walk beside others, not ahead of them. Gaara's heart, built from years of paranoia and ache, experienced something new: trust. Though fragile and awkward, that trust was beginning to shape the way he looked at the world. He didn't know whether to protect it or run from it. Fu, for the first time, didn't fear tomorrow. She didn't count the moments before betrayal. She didn't wait for someone to push her away. She allowed herself to believe, if only for a moment, that these friendships might last. Their steps were simple, but history often changed with simple steps. They spoke little. They dreamt quietly. They hoped cautiously. Every mile they crossed became a message the world could no longer ignore. The Jinchuriki had begun to rise. The future, once determined by fear, now trembled under the weight of possibility. The chain that had bound them for so long began to crack, not with violence, but with courage. They were no longer scattered shadows. They were becoming a constellation. And constellations do more than shine. They guide the lost. When a single Jinchuriki vanished, the world whispered. When two disappeared, the world worried. When three were gone together, the world panicked. Villages that had once ignored their feelings suddenly remembered their existence, not out of love or concern, but out of fear. Fear that their greatest weapons now belonged to no one. Fear that power, once controlled with chains and discipline, might return demanding justice. Meetings were called in hidden rooms. Tables where Cage once spoke calmly now shook beneath their fists. The leaders didn't wonder whether the children were safe. They wondered who would use them. What if another nation commanded three-tailed beasts? What if those children had chosen rebellion? What if peace shattered overnight? The more they feared, the more they prepared for war. And all the while, Naruto, Gaara, and Fu continued to walk, unaware that their freedom had terrified the world. Naruto did not realize yet that the more hearts he inspired, the more enemies he created. Hope could unite the hopeless, but it could also provoke those who profited from despair. In the deepest corners of every village, masks were being carved. Masks worn by hunters who believed they served justice. Their duty was simple: bring the runaways back, or erase them forever. Even allies could be enemies when fear commanded them. Meanwhile, the Akatsuki's plans became sharper. They did not need to search the world anymore. Naruto was leading every Jinchuriki straight into their sight. The leader of the Akatsuki watched with quiet satisfaction. He knew something the villages failed to understand. Great changes begin with small rebellions, and small rebellions always bring chaos. He ordered his followers to move. The capture would begin with precision. One strike at a time. One heart crushed before the others could react. Back with the trio, Naruto felt something shifting inside him. A weight, heavy but not unbearable, settled on his shoulders. He was the one who had stepped forward first. He was the one the others silently trusted. He was the one who believed they had a right to live without chains. He never asked to be a leader. But sometimes destiny chooses the one who cares the most. Gaara observed Naruto carefully. He had always believed power existed only to destroy. Yet here was someone who wielded power to protect. An idea so foreign that it shaken the very rules Gaara lived by. The sand within him, once restless and angry, now responded calmly to Naruto's presence. Gaara's identity was no longer defined solely by fear. Fu skipped ahead, allowing her happiness to grow naturally this time. For once, she felt like her wings, both real and imagined, could finally take her somewhere she wanted to be. She didn't just follow Naruto and Gaara. She believed in the direction they were heading, even if she didn't know the destination. Every step they took rewrote the meaning of survival. Survival no longer meant hiding. It meant living with purpose. And somewhere ahead, fate waited. Because the path they walked was not new, only forgotten. Long ago, 9 beasts had stood together as a family before humans divided them. Now their children were unknowingly restoring what history had stolen. The world did not yet understand what these young Jinchuriki were becoming. They were not fugitives. They were not weapons. They were not cursed. They were the beginning of a revolution. Fear was the first reaction. But what came after fear would change everything. Their journey forward meant the end of the world as shinobi knew it. Not with loud destruction, but with the quiet rise of hearts that refused to stay broken.